Have you ever felt like you're just stuck in professional quicksand? You're working harder and longer than ever, but you feel like you're not actually going anywhere? Well, today we're going to dig into the hidden forces that absolutely kill our productivity, all based on the insights from the book, The Executive Fix. Let's jump right in. The book kicks off with this really powerful image, comparing a career to a dense, disorienting forest. And I think that's a feeling a lot of us can relate to, right? That sense of being a little lost, not really sure which way to go. But the good news is, there is a way to find your bearings and start moving forward again. So, why do so many of us hit this professional wall? Well, it often shows up as a kind of paralysis, and it wears a few pretty common masks. Let's take a look at the personas that keep us trapped in this modern work gridlock. First step, we have the overwhelmed professional. You can picture it, can't you? A desk that's just buried under a mountain of tasks, an inbox that's completely overflowing. They're putting in the long hours, constantly fighting fires, but they still feel like they're perpetually behind. This is that classic busy versus productive trap, where all that activity just doesn't add up to real achievement. Next, there's the deadline dodger. Oh man, we've all felt that rising anxiety as a due date gets closer and closer, but for some reason, we just can't make ourselves start. Now, this isn't about being lazy. It's usually a fear of not being able to live up to these incredibly high standards we set for ourselves. And that anxiety leads to a frantic, last-minute rush that tanks the quality and just reinforces that little voice in our head that says we're not good enough. And finally, we have the perfectionist. You know this person. They're the one spending hours, maybe even days, tweaking a presentation long after it was perfectly fine. Their relentless chase for flawlessness causes huge delays and total burnout. And it's all driven by this deep fear that even one tiny imperfection will expose them as incompetent. It's really a form of self-sabotage that's just disguised as a commitment to quality. So, do any of these sound a little too familiar? Maybe you see a bit of yourself in one, or heck, maybe even all of them at different times. But here's the thing, these behaviors are just the symptoms, they're not the root cause. To really get what's going on, we have to look a little deeper into our own psychology. Okay, so let's dive into the psychology behind this paralysis. Because these feelings aren't just bad habits we picked up. They're actually predictable psychological patterns. And once you can see them and understand them, you can start to break free. Let's unpack the two biggest culprits. The first invisible force has a bit of a fancy name, maladaptive perfectionism. Now, this isn't just about having high standards, not at all. This is about being so terrified of failing or being judged that you become totally paralyzed. It's like you're trying to cross a bridge, but you're so focused on the fear of falling that you never, ever take that first step. This comparison here really just lays it all out. See, high standards are healthy. They're motivated by a desire for excellence, and the focus is on progress. That's productive. Maladaptive perfectionism, on the other hand, is motivated by a deep fear of failure. Your focus shifts completely from achieving something great to simply avoiding mistakes. And the outcome? Total paralysis and a whole lot of stress. And this is where it gets really nasty, because it creates this vicious cycle, a self-defeating loop. It starts when you set some kind of impossibly high standard. Then the fear that you won't meet it kicks in. So what do? You procrastinate, you put it off to avoid that potential failure. But of course, that just leads to a mad dash at the end, and the work isn't your best, which only confirms those feelings of inadequacy. It's a total self-fulfilling prophecy. All right, the second force at play is something called task completion bias. See, our brains are wired to absolutely love that feeling of accomplishment. We get a little hit of dopamine every time we check something off a to-do list. And this is exactly why we find ourselves clearing out a bunch of easy emails instead of starting that huge important project. It feels productive, but it's really just a trap that keeps us from the work that actually matters. And the cost of all these distractions? It's staggering. Get this, research cited in the book found that the constant barrage of emails, texts, and notifications can cause an average 10-point drop in your IQ. A 10-point drop. This isn't just about being a little distracted. It's about cognitive load. Every single time you switch tasks, your brain pays a price. It loses focus and mental energy. Just think about that. Our modern work environment is literally making it harder for us to think clearly. All right, we've dissected the problem pretty thoroughly. So now let's talk about the solution. And according to the top executive coaches, the real key is a fundamental shift in your mindset. It's all about letting go of this impossible goal of being flawless and instead embracing the incredible power of just moving forward. This right here, this is your new mantra. Dumb is better than perfect. You gotta embrace it. This simple phrase is the absolute key to breaking free from that paralysis. Now, this is not an excuse for sloppy work. It's about giving yourself permission to move forward, to recognize when something is good enough so you can build momentum and actually make real, tangible progress. A new mindset is the critical first step. But let's be real, you need some practical tools to actually put it into action. So let's get into a couple of concrete frameworks you can start using literally today.
This is the Eisenhower Matrix, and it is a deceptively simple but incredibly powerful tool for prioritizing. It forces you to categorize your tasks by how urgent and how important they are, so you stop just reacting to whatever is screaming the loudest for your attention. But the real magic? It happens in Quadrant 2, the important but not urgent tasks. This is where stuff like long-term planning, learning new skills, and building relationships lives. When you intentionally schedule time for these things, you shift from constantly putting out fires to proactively building the future you want.
We all have them, those huge, intimidating projects that just loom over us, and we can't bring ourselves to start. The trick is to turn that mountain into a series of small, manageable molehills. You break it down into the smallest possible steps you can think of. Then, you forget about the whole project and just focus on completing the very first one. This taps right back into our brain's love for those quick wins, creating a sense of accomplishment that builds momentum and makes the whole thing feel way less scary. Okay, we've covered the psychology and the practical tools. But here's the thing. Knowledge without action is basically just trivia. Real change only begins the moment you decide to do something. So what does your journey out of paralysis look like, starting right now? Now, the Executive Fix actually lays out a full 60-day plan for transformation, but here's a simplified version. The first 2 weeks are all about awareness. You just track where your time is really going, no judgment. Then you start to use tools like the Eisenhower Matrix. The second month is all about refining those habits, carving out time for deep work, learning to delegate. Just remember, this is a marathon, not a sprint. It's a gradual process of building new, more effective habits one day at a time. And that brings us to the end of our explainer, but really to the beginning of your journey. I want to leave you with this one question to help you take that very first step out of the forest. Forget about perfection, forget about feeling overwhelmed. Just ask yourself, what is the one small, important, good enough task you will complete today? That right there is your first step onto a new, much clearer path forward.